The quarantine vessel hung in silent orbit above Earth, its sleek metallic hull reflecting the blue-green planet below. Inside, Captain Mira Vaxorin of the Istrian Imperial Fleet lay on a medical platform, her once powerful body betraying her with each passing cycle. The silver-blue markings that adorned her alabaster skin, symbols of her rank and battle prowess, had dulled to a sickly gray. Monitors beeped steadily, documenting her decline in clinical precision. "Status report," she commanded, her voice still carrying the authority that had led her squadron through the Nebula Wars. "Cellular degradation continues at 0.37% per Earth day," replied the ship's AI. "Imperial medical protocol estimates 17 days until critical failure." Mira closed her eyes, suppressing the wave of anger and despair that threatened to consume her. Warriors of the Istrian Empire did not fear death, they embraced it in glorious battle. But this slow disintegration was no warrior's end. The genetic breakdown triggered during the ambush at Proxima Station was consuming her from within, and the finest minds of her civilization had found no solution. "A human transport approaches," announced the AI. "They have sent the specialist as promised." "I need no primitive assistance," Mira growled, though she knew the protest was futile. The Imperial command had been clear, her condition was unprecedented, and in their desperation, they'd reached out to Earth's exobiology division, whose research into interspecies cellular compatibility had recently gained attention across the galaxy. The airlock hissed open, and Dr. Julian Hayes entered her chamber. He moved with a quiet confidence that surprised her. Most humans she'd encountered approached Istrians with visible trepidation, intimidated by their height and formidable reputation. "Captain Vaxorin," he said, offering a respectful nod rather than attempting the complex Istrian greeting gesture. "I'm Dr. Julian Hayes. Thank you for allowing me to examine you." "The gratitude is misplaced," she replied coldly. "My permission was not sought." If her hostility affected him, he showed no sign. Instead, he began setting up equipment beside her platform, movements efficient and precise. "Your medical data is fascinating," he said as he worked. "I've been studying it for days. The cellular structure of your species is remarkable, almost crystalline in its organization." Mira watched him warily. "And have you found what my own people could not?" "Perhaps." Julian approached with a scanner. "May I?" She gave a curt nod, and he passed the device slowly over her body, studying the readings with intense concentration. Then, to her surprise, he set the scanner aside and simply looked at her, not as a specimen, but with genuine compassion. "Captain, your condition isn't what anyone thinks," he said quietly. "Your cells aren't rejecting life. They're starving for connection." "Explain," she demanded, ignoring the pain that flared along her spine. "Istrian biology operates on principles we've only begun to understand. Your cellular structure resonates at specific frequencies that harmonize with your collective consciousness. But the battle trauma disrupted this resonance." He leaned closer, his voice filled with conviction. "Your body is seeking a specific bioempathic frequency to realign itself. And you believe humans possess this frequency?" Her tone was skeptical, but something in his certainty stirred the first flicker of hope she'd felt in weeks. "We do." Julian extended his hand, stopping just short of touching her. "Humans naturally emit these frequencies through physical contact, through emotional connection. It's something we've taken for granted, but your condition proves its biological significance." Mira stared at his outstretched hand as though it were a weapon. "You propose to touch me. Just a simple connection at first. No needles, no invasive procedures." His eyes met hers steadily. "Just let me hold your hand. If I'm right, we should see immediate readings on your cellular stability." Pride and desperation warred within her. An Istrian warrior accepting comfort from a human, it was unthinkable. And yet, death approached with certainty. "You will record all data," she said finally, her voice hardening to mask her vulnerability. "This is a scientific procedure, nothing more." "Of course," Julian agreed. Slowly, fighting against every instinct of her training, Mira extended her hand. Julian's fingers closed gently around hers. The effect was instantaneous. A warm pulse seemed to flow from the point of contact, spreading through her arm and into her chest. On the monitors, erratic patterns suddenly stabilized, and for the first time in weeks, the constant pain receded slightly. Her eyes widened, meeting Julian's gaze with shock and the first fragile thread of something she'd forgotten existed, hope. "What is happening?" she whispered. "The beginning of your healing," Julian answered softly. and perhaps something more. 3 days had passed since the first contact, and Mira struggled to reconcile her warrior's pride with the undeniable evidence of her body's response. Each time Dr. Hayes departed, her symptoms would gradually return, the pain creeping back like an insidious tide. Your cellular stability has improved by 18%, Julian announced, reviewing the data on his tablet. But it reverts when our sessions end. Mira sat rigidly at the edge of her bed, her posture military straight despite her weakness. Then your treatment is merely palliative, not curative. We need more consistent contact to create lasting change, he explained. Your body is learning a new resonance pattern, but it needs time to adapt. He approached her bedside, no longer hesitant. Their routine had become familiar. You would sit beside her, take her hand, and they would remain that way for hours while he monitored her readings. Today, however, he suggested something different. I'd like to try something more, Julian said. If you're willing. Mira's eyes narrowed. Explain. A stronger connection, my arm around your shoulders. The increased contact should amplify the effect. She stiffened visibly. That would be inappropriate. It's medicine, Captain, he said gently. Your cells respond to the bioempathic field my body generates. The stronger the connection, the faster you're healing. A muscle worked in her jaw as she considered. Death or indignity, neither choice appealed to an Astrian warrior. Yet her duty to the Empire demanded she return to service. Proceed, she finally commanded, as though ordering a tactical maneuver. Julian moved carefully, sitting beside her on the platform and placing his arm lightly around her shoulders. The effect was immediate. Warmth cascaded through her body, and the monitors showed a dramatic spike in cellular stability. Remarkable, Julian murmured, watching the readings. Mira remained rigid for several minutes before slowly, almost imperceptibly, relaxing into the contact. A strange sensation swept through her, not just the absence of pain, but something she couldn't identify, something her species rarely experienced. Your heart rate has decreased, Julian noted. Are you uncomfortable? No, she admitted reluctantly. It is tolerable. They sat in silence, the human's warmth seeping into her cooler skin. Gradually, Mira found herself studying him, the concentration in his eyes, the gentle rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. Humans were considered fragile among the stars, yet there was a quiet strength in him she hadn't anticipated. Why did you volunteer for this assignment? She asked suddenly. Surely there were less complicated research opportunities. Julian considered her question. I've dedicated my career to understanding how different species connect. When I read about your condition, I saw beyond the medical mystery to the person suffering. I am not a person, she corrected. I am a warrior. You're both, he replied simply. Just as I'm both a scientist and a human who feels compassion. Something in his words disturbed her worldview. Astrians did not value compassion as a virtue. Efficiency, strength, loyalty to the collective, these were their guiding principles. The Empire will not understand this treatment, she said quietly. Physical contact with other species is discouraged. Perhaps there's wisdom your Empire hasn't discovered yet, Julian suggested, his voice warm with no trace of judgment. Mira found herself unable to deliver the sharp rebuke such a statement deserved. Instead, she noticed the silver-blue markings on her forearm brightening, a sign of improved cellular function. The readings are stabilizing, Julian noted with satisfaction. I believe we're making real progress. Mira said nothing, but as the session continued, she allowed herself to lean slightly into his touch, surrendering a fraction of her rigid control. Something was changing within her, not just the healing of her body, but a subtle shift in her understanding of strength and connection. And that, perhaps, frightened her more than death itself. The quarantine vessel's observation deck offered a spectacular view of Earth, a swirling marble of blue and white that captivated Mira more than she cared to admit. Julian stood beside her, their shoulders nearly touching as they gazed at the planet below. It looks peaceful from here, Mira observed. Your world. Appearances can be deceiving, Julian replied. We have our conflicts, just as your people do. Yet you chose healing as your life's work rather than warfare. Julian smiled. Not everyone is suited to be a warrior, Captain. 2 weeks had passed, and their daily sessions had evolved beyond simple contact. Mira's condition had stabilized enough that they could move around the ship, and Julian had suggested that varying their environment might enhance her treatment. Tell me about your home, Julian said as they watched a storm system swirl across Earth's Pacific Ocean. Normally, Mira would have rebuffed such personal inquiry, But something had changed between them, a trust born of necessity and growing into something more nuanced. Astria is a world of crystalline forests and magnetic seas, she said, surprising herself with the wistfulness in her voice. Our cities are built within massive geode formations. At dusk, when the twin suns set, the entire landscape glows with stored light. It sounds beautiful, Julian said softly. It is, ordered, she replied. Every Astrian knows their purpose from inception. Mine was to lead, to protect. And is that all you wanted to be? The question struck her like a physical blow. No one had ever asked her what she wanted, not her commanders, not her squadron, not even herself. Before she could formulate a response, pain lanced through her body. She gasped, stumbling forward, and Julian caught her, pulling her against his chest to support her weight. The readings are dropping, he said urgently, checking his wrist monitor. Your cells are destabilizing. Mira clutched at his arms, her normally pale skin flushing with fever. It's happening faster this time. Julian made a quick decision. We need to increase the contact. Captain, Mira, I need to hold you closer. She nodded weakly, beyond pride now as the genetic breakdown accelerated. Julian guided her to the floor, cradling her against him, her head resting on his shoulder, their bodies aligned. Stay with me, he whispered, his arms tightening around her. Focus on my voice, on my heartbeat. Mira closed her eyes, suddenly overwhelmed by sensation, the steady rhythm of his heart, the warmth of his skin, the gentle pressure of his hands on her back. Gradually, the pain receded, replaced by waves of something entirely unfamiliar, comfort, security, connection. What is happening to me? She murmured against his neck. Your body is healing, Julian said, but maybe something else is healing too. They remained entwined as minutes stretched into hours, neither willing to break the contact that was now clearly saving her life. As night fell over the part of Earth visible from their viewport, Mira found herself speaking about things she'd never shared, her childhood training, her first command, the weight of responsibility she carried. Julian listened, offering stories of his own, his passion for understanding life in all its forms, his failures and successes, his hopes for what humanity might become among the stars. We are very different, Mira observed softly. Yes, Julian agreed, his fingers gently tracing the now brightening markings along her arm. And that difference might be exactly what we both needed. As she drifted into sleep, still held securely in his arms, Mira realized that the walls she had built around herself for a lifetime were crumbling, and for the first time, she welcomed their fall. The Imperial command vessel will arrive in 48 hours, the ship's AI announced with clinical precision. Mira stood at the viewport, her body now almost fully recovered. The silver-blue markings across her skin glowed with renewed vigor, and her strength had returned, along with a growing sense of dread she couldn't explain. Your recovery is remarkable, Julian said, reviewing her latest scans. Your cellular structure has not only stabilized but strengthened. The new resonance pattern has fully integrated. Then your work is complete, Mira stated flatly. The Empire will be pleased. Julian set down his tablet, studying her rigid posture. Over the past 3 weeks, he had come to read her subtle cues, the slight tension in her shoulders, the careful control of her expressions. She was troubled. Is returning to your duties not what you wanted? He asked carefully. Mira turned to face him, her eyes searching his. It is what I was created for. That's not what I asked. A silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Their daily sessions had evolved into something neither had anticipated, long conversations, shared meals, moments of unexpected laughter. The contact that had begun as clinical treatment had become something they both sought for reasons beyond medicine. I am confused, Mira finally admitted, her voice barely audible. The Empire teaches that connection is weakness, that attachment clouds judgment. Yet it was connection that saved my life. Julian stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, the warmth her body now seemed to crave. Perhaps your Empire doesn't have all the answers, he suggested gently. Perhaps there are things humans and Astrians could learn from each other. The High Command would never accept such thinking, she said, though something in her voice had softened. We are warriors, not diplomats. You're more than a warrior, Mira, Julian said, using her name without her rank for the first time. You've proven that here. She looked down at his hand, so close to hers, remembering how that first tentative touch had changed everything. Before she could stop herself, she reached out, interlacing her fingers with his. When I leave, she said quietly, this treatment, this connection, ends. Julian's hand tightened around hers. It doesn't have to. What are you suggesting? Her eyes met his, a mixture of hope and fear visible in their depths. I'm suggesting that what we've discovered here is too important to abandon, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. Not just for your health, but for what it could mean for both our peoples. Mira stepped closer, her free hand rising hesitantly to touch his face. The sensation sent waves of pleasure through her newfound sensitivity. The Empire has no protocol for this, she whispered. Then perhaps it's time to write a new one, Julian replied, his arm slipping around her waist, drawing her against him. Their lips met in a tentative kiss that deepened as Mira surrendered to the feelings she had been fighting for weeks. Her body responded with a surge of energy that illuminated her markings like stars. When they finally separated, both breathless, Mira pressed her forehead against his, an intimate gesture among her people, reserved only for those most trusted. I don't know how to be anything but what I am, she confessed. I'm not asking you to change, Julian assured her. I'm asking you to expand, to add to what you already are. Outside the viewport, Earth continued its serene rotation, while inside, two beings from different worlds faced a decision that would alter both their destinies. The Imperial command vessel loomed outside the quarantined ship, its massive hull dwarfing the smaller craft. Inside, Mira stood in her full ceremonial armor, restored to her former glory, physically, at least. Mentally, she was in turmoil. Admiral Kresh has requested your immediate transfer, the AI informed her. The boarding shuttle will dock in 10 minutes. Julian watched her from across the room, his expression carefully neutral despite the pain evident in his eyes. The past 48 hours had been a storm of emotion as they faced their impending separation. Your report is complete? Mira asked, her voice formal, distant. Yes, Julian replied. I've documented everything, your condition, the treatment, the results. He hesitated. Everything but what couldn't be measured by instruments. Mira turned to face the viewport, watching the imposing Astrian vessel. The Empire will study your findings. Perhaps they will establish diplomatic relations to learn more about this bioempathic phenomenon. Is that all it was to you? Julian asked quietly. A phenomenon. Her shoulders tensed, then relaxed as she made a decision. Slowly, she removed her ceremonial helmet and turned to face him. No, she said simply. It was much more. Julian crossed the room to stand before her. Then don't go back to a life that denies what you now know to be true. What alternative do I have? I am bound by duty, by my very genetic code. Create a new duty, he urged. Your people sent you here because they had no answers. What you've discovered, what we've discovered together, could help others like you. Mira considered his words. You suggest I become an emissary. I suggest you become a pioneer, Julian corrected. The first of your kind to explore the power of connection rather than conquest. Before she could respond, the ship's communication system activated. Admiral Kresh's stern visage filled the main screen. Captain Vaxorin, he greeted her. We have received the human's report. The High Command is intrigued by these findings. Mira straightened. Admiral, I request permission to establish a permanent research outpost with Earth's Exobiology Division. What we've discovered has implications beyond my personal recovery. Julian stared at her in surprise as she continued with growing confidence. The bioempathic frequency humans naturally emit could revolutionize our understanding of cellular harmony. It could lead to breakthroughs in treating combat injuries previously deemed terminal. The Admiral's expression remained impassive. And you wish to oversee this research personally? I do, Mira confirmed. With Dr. Hayes as my human counterpart. A long pause followed as the Admiral studied her. Your markings, he finally noted. They've changed pattern. Mira glanced down at her arms, where the silver-blue lines had indeed shifted, forming new, more complex patterns that reflected her internal transformation. Yes, Admiral. I believe I am evolving, as all Astrians must to survive. Another long silence stretched between them before the Admiral spoke again. The High Command will consider your proposal. Until then, you will remain at your current post. The screen went dark, and Mira turned to find Julian staring at her in wonder. That was unexpected, he said. For me as well, she admitted, a small smile forming on her lips. She reached for his hand, no longer hesitant, no longer conflicted. As their fingers intertwined, the familiar warmth spread through her body, not medicine now, but a connection freely chosen. Whether they approve or not, she said softly, I have found something I cannot abandon. Julian pulled her closer, his free hand tracing the new patterns on her skin. "What happens now?" "Now," Mira replied, resting her forehead against his in the intimate gesture of her people. "We create our own protocol." Outside, Earth and the Imperial vessel hung in space, different worlds that had collided in the most unexpected way. And between them, in a small quarantine ship, two beings had discovered that healing could come in many forms, and that sometimes the touch of another soul was the most powerful medicine of all.